Welcome to Strengthening Our Democracy, a program presented on behalf of the Ismaili Jamatkhana and Center's virtual series. My name is Behnoosh, and I serve in a voluntary capacity as the Member for Communications and Outreach on the Ismaili Council for the Southeastern United States. The Ismaili Jamatkhana around the world are more than places of worship and spiritual search. These spaces hope to encourage community engagement and broaden our intellectual horizons. As we celebrate the International Day of Democracy, it is an opportunity for us to recall that democracy is about the people. It is built on genuine ethics and values like equality, civic participation, and inclusion. As American citizens, we have trust in our elected officials as they make critical decisions on issues that affect our lives. Today, the world faces a number of challenges: a public health crisis, growing inequities, and transformational changes from technology to globalization. True democracy is built upon constant dialogue between the people and the political class. We are delighted to bring you some conversations with the political class. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for this conversation, Ali Jamal. Ali is a member of the Aga Khan Conciliation and Arbitration Board for the Southeastern United States. Ali will engage in dialogue with the Democratic candidate for the United States House, Georgia District 7, candidate Dr. Carolyn Bourdeaux. Welcome, Ali.
Thank you, Behnoosh, for the kind introduction. I'm delighted to be part of this forum today. We have here today candidate Carolyn Bourdeaux. Wanted to introduce you to her. She is a professor at the Andrew Young School of Public Policy since 2003. From 2007 to 2010, she took a leave of absence to be director of Georgia's Senate Budget and Evaluation Office. There, she worked in a nonpartisan role to help the state balance the budget during the Great Recession. The Senate honored her for her service to the state of Georgia with Senate Resolution 1598. Afterwards, she returned to the Andrew Young School and founded the Center for State and Local Finance to teach the next generation of leaders about responsible and compassionate public policy. Welcome, candidate Bourdeaux.
Thank you for having me.
So if you don't mind, I would just like to jump right into the questions at this point.
Sounds good.
All right. So currently, we are facing a significant number of global issues. The largest public health crisis in a century, the plight of refugees, ongoing political tensions between nations, economic hardships, and racial and gender inequities. The promise of globalization has spawned a nationalistic response, and the short-term outlook doesn't seem too positive. What our question at this point is, what are your policies that you expose that will give us hope and confidence for a better tomorrow?
So thank you for that. I live in Swanee with my husband, and I've got an 8-year-old son. And so I am very concerned about his future and the future of our country. I got into this race originally around the issue of healthcare and my firm belief that everybody needs affordable quality healthcare. And interestingly, healthcare really stands at the intersection of some of those issues that you have just raised. It's an issue of social justice. It's an issue of fiscal responsibility. It's an issue of taking care of our people. What we've learned with coronavirus, is if my neighbor sneezes, I get sick. It's always been this way, that we are very, very interconnected. But we really, really see it now with this current crisis. Just a story, there were, parents I was talking to the other day, and their son is bipolar. And the only place that he can get treatment for his disease is when he, kind of goes off the deep end and ends up in prison. And the place where we treat people for mental illness in this country at this point is in our prison system. And when he gets out, he's been restabilized, he's ready to go, ready to have a job, be a productive citizen in our community. But he doesn't have health insurance and he has no health care. And so he's not able to receive the treatment once he comes back. And we see those kinds of problems over and over and over again, and we all pay for that. We pay for that in the loss of a citizen who would be productive, who would be working, who'd be paying taxes. We pay for that in the cost of the prison systems. 40% of the adult men in our prison system have some form of serious mental illness. There are over 100,000 people in the 7th Congressional District without health insurance. We pay for that in many other ways. They show up in our emergency rooms at the late stage of a disease, in desperate conditions. And, it's morally wrong that they don't have health care. And yet we also all pay for that in our own rising premiums. So, one of the key issues I talk about a lot is, and one of the really pressing pocketbook issues for so many people is fixing our healthcare system, going back, fixing the Affordable Care Act, adding a public option to our exchange so that individuals and small businesses have affordable health insurance options.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for that response. Just moving right along, in 2015, His Highness the Aga Khan delivered the keynote address at the Athens Democracy Forum on the International Day of Democracy. He suggested 4 elements that could help strengthen democracy's effectiveness in improving the quality of its constituents' lives. They are improved constitutional understanding, independent and pluralistic media, the potential of civil society, and a genuine democratic ethic. How would you strengthen democracy?
So one of the other reasons I got into this race was because I really see our country itself going off the rails in terms of our democracy. I just want to say, thank you to the Ismaili community for hosting forums like this, because these are really exactly walking the walk, not just talking the talk, living the values, being out there, talking to the community, educating your community about the different issues that people who are running for office are involved in and care about. So I really do appreciate that. It's an important contribution. One of the critical issues that's really emerged in this race, though, and one of the many things going sideways in this country, is voting rights. When I ran back in 2018, I ran for this seat and closed a 20 percentage point gap. I came within 433 votes of winning the seat. But that occurred after weeks and weeks of litigation, because this was ground zero for a lot of the voting problems that happened in Georgia. Most notably, 1/3 of the absentee ballots that were thrown out in the state of Georgia came out of this district. And 2/3 of those ballots that were thrown out were people of color, people from the African American community, the Hispanic community, and the Asian community. And, that was very frustrating to see that. And we had to litigate around that. Once again, on the primary on June 9th, I woke up in the morning and, it was the day of the primary. I was running again. And all of a sudden, I started getting texts from voters who had showed up at their polling locations and found out that there were no voting machines when they showed up that morning. We saw horrific lines, people waiting 8 hours or longer till 2 a.m. to exercise their right to vote. Now, we saw extraordinary turnout. So people fought for that vote. But it shouldn't have to be that hard. We should make sure that every voice is heard, every vote is counted. And one of the critical things that I'm interested in when I go to Washington is making sure that we heal our democracy. We make sure that we reaffirm the Voting Rights Act. We make sure that we work on things like campaign finance reform and nonpartisan redistricting, other things to get the special interest money out of politics, to make sure that our districts are drawn in ways that are fair. So I'm very, very committed, not just to talking about issues and improving issues like healthcare, but also to making sure that our democracy itself functions the way it was intended.
Thank you, Candidate Caroline. That was that's something that I was expecting from your response. Since you were talking about the voting rights and the polling issues that we had earlier on, is there something that you are looking into to avoid the same result this year around?
Right. So we are working very hard. And if people are interested in being involved in our campaign, a key part of our campaign is just basic voter protection. We have allies who go to the different boards of elections to try to raise the issues and advocate on behalf of voters in this district to make sure that those problems are addressed next time. So there are a couple things that I would really encourage people to do. I know that there's worry about the post office right now. That being said, absentee ballots are a very safe and effective way to vote. We actually have drop boxes all over Gwinnett and Forsyth. Those are the two districts of two counties in the 7th district, where you can go drop off your ballot after you've voted. That way you don't have to stand in long lines on election day. So that's one thing everybody can do. Vote early, vote by mail. It is safe, it is easy. You can go to the Secretary of State's website, mvp.sos.ga.gov. You can also go to my website, carolynforcongress.com, and you can look up, your how to vote by mail. Next, vote. If you can't do that, or that's not something you're comfortable with, please take advantage of the early voting that we have here in Georgia. That is also extremely important. And last, if you're going on election day, put on that mask, suit up, and please go vote. I mean, the most important thing that citizens can do right now is to vote. Another important thing is to get in and get involved in the campaigns, get behind the candidates that you want to support, help stand up this democracy.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's important just to get out of vote, even if you can't do early voting or ballot voting, mail-in.
Fight for it. We've got to fight for the vote. Yes.
Great. So within the civil society, professions such as teachers, nurses, and journalists are critical to stable growth and democracy. These professions are under-resourced with respect to salary and professional development training. If the economic status of these professions is not corrected, how will this impact the future of education, healthcare, and ensuring a pluralistic media? So
that is a great question. These are very, very critical roles in our community. I have an 8-year-old son. He is in 3rd grade. One of the most important people in my life is his 3rd grade teacher, who is going to make sure that his reading goes smoothly, that he learns math, he's learning his STEM. That teacher is giving him the path to upward mobility. Same with our public universities. These are all incredibly important roles. My parents were public school teachers. I teach at a public university. We have a lot to do to support people in these kinds of roles that are so important to our lives. I mean, I also add that many of our police, our fire, these are frontline people who are dealing with coronavirus right now and are trying to help us. And we need to make sure that they have the education and the support and the resources they need to do their jobs well. One of the many things I'm very interested in is student loan forgiveness programs. So that we make sure that people who want to go into these sort of the caring professions, the community professions, ones that are never going to pay wildly well or anything like that, that they have, that they're supported with things like student loan forgiveness. So if they go and get a teaching certificate and advance in that profession, that over time their student loans are forgiven. We need doctors in many of our rural areas. There are all sorts of gaps we have in our education and our social safety net, where we really need people of quality and compassion in those jobs. And I'm very committed to finding ways to support them.
Thank you. As for, I know we've touched on education and healthcare. Let's kind of shift to economy and focus on how we can rebuild. Small businesses, and by that I mean those businesses that have fewer than 50 employees, are continuing to struggle as a result of this pandemic. What role or responsibility does government have to support small businesses during these challenging times?
Yeah. So, well, my background is a bit more in the public service space. My husband is a businessman, and my father was a teacher, but also took a period of his life where he ran a small business. So I'm very, very aware of some of the issues that small businesses face. Everything from, just getting out, the constant worry about cash flow, and are they going to be able to get the money in on time? Are they going to be able to make payroll? What happens when a key employee is sick? These are all things that have been very present in my life. And right now, we're really facing an unprecedented crisis. There are several things we need to think about. First, obviously, we need to sustain our small businesses during this period of, sort of economic turmoil. And so that means extending the loan programs and grant programs, the PPP and some of those other programs, in order to keep our small businesses afloat over this period. Beyond that, though, the bigger picture is that we need to get this crisis under control. And the frustration I have is that our national government and our state government have proved such poor management and incompetent management of this crisis. And there are many pieces of this, but one of the most obvious is testing. We still don't have quick testing, and we need to have that if we are to find out where the disease is. Beyond that, we need to invest in our public health infrastructure so that we can have contact tracing. And when the disease flares up, we can tamp it down. Because we don't have these basic supports in place to actually get our arms around, get control of the disease, everything else is disrupted. Because we don't have that, our businesses can't open, for business as usual. Our schools are struggling to open. And so, really what we need to do is immediately take action to get control of the coronavirus, and then the other things will come along much more naturally.
Thank you, candidate. We've seen the increased role that social media plays in our lives, both positive and negative. Information can now be shared almost instantaneously across the globe. It also opens up the potential of bad actors to spread disinformation aimed at weakening societies. What role should governments play in ensuring that our democracies are not threatened by such acts, while also being able to benefit from the positives that social media offers?
So let me just say, what we are doing right now is a very important positive that social media offers, right? And that we're going to be offering this programming, over an internet social media type platform. And I think what we are doing now also is very important in helping combat the misinformation that is out there. Because this is a place where, we can talk straight to camera and tell people what it is we are thinking about, and we don't have words put in our mouths by other people. So I just think having community organizations out there, helping educate the community that they are a part of about the issues, about public policy, about how the choices that are made in places like Washington affect their lives. And one of the reasons I'm running is because it has seemed to me that our elected officials have lost their line of sight to us as people. What I see when I look in Washington is policies that are made to benefit very, very large corporations frequently at the expense of us. We see that in our prescription drug prices, for instance. My father was very sick for many years. He was a diabetic on insulin, and he paid $300 for 10 milliliters of insulin. And this same medication costs $25 in Canada. Why is that? The only explanation can be that we have very large special interests who go to Washington, and their business model is not to provide a high quality product for a reasonable price. Instead, it's to hire lobbyists to increase prices, to have monopoly control over medications, and to wring money out of the taxpayers. And those are the kind of things I just think have gone so badly sideways in this country and really need to be addressed. Thank
you for sharing some of those ideas. Earlier in In this forum, I had mentioned the speech of His Highness that he gave at Athens Democracy Forum in 2015. In that same speech, he later said, "One ultimate requirement for any effective democracy is the capacity to compromise. Social order rests in the end either on oppression or accommodation, but we can never find that balancing point where the interests of all parties are recognized unless competing leaders and their diverse followers alike are committed to finding common ground." How would you implement that principle, and how would you influence your party to do the same?
So throughout my life, I've really spent most of my life working in various public service roles. You mentioned I was director of the Senate Budget and Evaluation Office. Today I'm running as a Democrat, but when I was working at the Senate Budget Office, I was nonpartisan staff and worked under the Republican leadership and helped them think their way through balancing the state budget during the worst fiscal crisis that the state had faced since the Great Depression. And at the end of my time there, I was honored by them on a bipartisan basis for significant service to the state of Georgia. Before that, though, I have also worked in a number of public service roles. I was a legislative aide and advisor to Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon. And every single piece of legislation that I worked on with him had a Republican co-sponsor. We can come together, but the important piece of this is that we cannot let our elected officials lose their line of sight to the people. When I worked for Ron Wyden, every single piece of legislation we worked on, I would analyze in exhaustive detail to understand the impact that legislation had on his constituents, the people in his district when he was in the House, the people in his state when he was in the Senate. And I worked for him in both places. And that just seems like it is not happening. We have a representative right now who has allowed this district to have over 100,000 people without health insurance, has allowed the state to go forward with his constituents paying extortionary prices for health insurance and for prescription medications. How can that be? We have to have representatives who actually care about those things, and we have to hold them accountable for fixing those kinds of problems. So I will say, I am very committed to working in a bipartisan basis, to bringing people together, to building the coalitions, to actually solve the problems for the people of this district. And that is really what I am all about. That's why I am doing this, what I love, which is solving problems that make people's lives better.
Thank you for that. Before we conclude this conversation, I would like to request you share some closing thoughts.
Okay. Well, to wrap up, I very much appreciate the Ismaili community doing this. I visited with you all at the Prayer Center, and I appreciate so much the civic engagement. I got into this race because I believe in a country that is diverse, inclusive, global in its outlook and aspirations. I believe that everybody deserves quality, affordable health care. I believe we need to support our small business community and make sure that they have the supports that they need to thrive. And last of all, I know we need to support the next generation. I have a son. I want to make sure that he and all of our children have access to a world-class education, and that we invest in them, but also invest in the infrastructure in the economy so that they have access to opportunity and to the American dream. Thank you guys for having me here. It's been great to visit with you.
Thank you. That wraps up our questions. And I would like to just thank you once again for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Candidate Bourdeaux, for sharing your time and your perspectives on this topic.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to the moderator for this conversation, Ambrina Aladina. Ambrina will engage in dialogue with the Republican candidate for the United States House, Georgia, District 7, candidate Dr. Rich McCormick. Welcome, Ambrina.
Thank you so much, Behnoosh. I appreciate it. Dr. McCormick, welcome to you as well.
Thank you for having me on today.
Thank you for being on. I appreciate you taking your afternoon and spending some time with the Ismaili community and engaging in dialogue with us today.
It's absolutely my pleasure.
Absolutely. I'd like to just give a short bio before we begin. Rich is a graduate of Morehouse School of Medicine, where he was also student body president and completed residency in emergency medicine through Emory while training at Grady Hospital in Atlanta. He also received his MBA from National University in California with over 20 years in the U.S. Marine Corps and the Navy. Rich served in combat zones in Africa and Persian Gulf and Afghanistan. As a Marine, he flew helicopters and taught at Georgia Tech and Morehouse College as a Marine officer instructor. In the Navy, Rich earned the rank of commander and served as the department head of the Emergency Medicine Department in Afghanistan. Thank you, Dr. McCormick, for all your services. I salute you and thank you for serving our country and doing all that we can only think about, which is amazing. Thank you so much. I'd like
My
to
pleasure.
Go ahead.
It's been my honor to serve with some of the finest people you could ever imagine. I've always said if I can be anywhere of a composite of all my wonderful friends, then I'd be a great man indeed. And that's what I try to do, is emulate the wonderful people that surround me.
That's amazing. And what a great inspiration to go by as well. I'd like to dive into our dialogue, if that's okay.
Please.
Currently, we're facing significant number of global issues. The largest public health crisis in the century, the flight of refugees, ongoing political tensions between nations, economic hardships, and racial and gender inequalities. The promise of globalization has spawned a nationalistic response, and short-term outlook doesn't seem too responsive or positive. What policies do you espouse that will give you hope and confidence for a better tomorrow?
Well, I'm very fortunate to live in a country like we do, where we have the individual freedoms. If you look at our Constitution and what it represents, it first of all understands and recognizes that our rights that were given to us by God. Those can't be given to us by a government or by anyone else, that we're given those inalienable rights by our Creator, and that we as the people of the United States give power to our government in limited amounts, so that we aren't controlled by them, that we have the ability to be pluralistic, so we can also reach out and be ourselves, so we can represent each other in whatever groups we choose, that we're not forced into aggregates and we cannot be defined by other people. And I think that's what I think His Highness the Aga Khan has been so good at, is representing his community the way he wants to define it, rather than being defined by somebody else. And I know we're at a point where we become very contentious in politics, where we have nations that are going against nations, which we've always had for the history of the entire world. But I think the more people that reach out and show that we may be different, we may have different beliefs, we may have different representation, even inside of our own religion, our own countries, our own political factions, but that we all should be for each other, that we start each conversation with love, and that if we have a difference, that we can have a difference peacefully moving forward. I think if you look at the successful groups, such as the Ismaili community has been very good at this. And I think other people also, the people who are successful and grow, are the ones who start off with the understanding that everything that we do should be for the benefit of all people. And I think that's where we're lacking sometimes. So often the time right now, we're starting off with the conversation with saying somebody's wrong or somebody's evil. And I think we start to really demonize each other rather than start a conversation with what's best for all of us. And I think that's what our great nation was founded on, is these aggregates of people that are so different that can come together under one flag and represent something that's truly unique. And that's the American dream, an opportunity for every person, no matter what your background is, no matter what your race is, no matter what your business acumen is. But if you come here, if you work hard, you will be successful. And even though we have our problems, like every family member has a problem, we're still a family. We're still moving towards a generally good thing for everybody. And what we represent has been attracting people from all over the world for hundreds of years now. And it's been a wonderful experiment that's resulted in great things.
The melting pot of the world.
Truly.
Progressive, it's, as strange as that seems, it's a progressive thought, right? Even in today's time, to teach everyone to be compassionate and loving and humble, look at the glass half full rather than half empty. These are compassionate and progressive thoughts that we need to bring to every single member of our community, which is some amazing thoughts for our leadership within our country, as well as His Highness the Aga Khan to bring forward, to bring better awareness across all our communities, to be able to move forward with equalities and happiness, and like you said, with love and compassion. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll move on to our next question. In 2015, His Highness the Aga Khan delivered the keynote address to the Athens Democracy Forum on the International Day of Democracy. He suggested 4 elements that could help strengthen democracy's effectiveness in improving the quality of constituents' lives. They are: improve constitutional understanding, independent and pluralistic media, the potential of civil society, and genuine democratic ethic. How do you see being able to strengthen democracy?
So one of the interesting things I read about recently is that we realized that freedom can construct a democracy, but democracy doesn't always result in freedom. And that's what makes the United States much different from other democracies. You'll see democracies all over the world right now that are failing democracies. And when I say that, you're not resulting in more freedoms. You're seeing democracies that take away freedoms, as a matter of fact. The bigger a government gets, the more powerful it gets, the more that makes people want to be the same. In other words, they take away your ability to make independent choices, whether it be in business, in medicine, healthcare, education, all the things that make the United States so pluralistic and so different and have so many freedoms that make it so unique, that draw so many people from all over the world and still fit in together. And I know a lot of people would talk very poorly about our country and say that this is a very bad place to live. But if you compare it to any other nation around the world, and I would challenge anybody to do that, I think people realize what a good thing we have here. But yet, like you said, in the media likes to tell us a lot of times that we have a very bad country, that we have a bad government. But if you see why we're so successful, is because we have a limited government. We've allowed people to have the freedom of speech, whether it be through the media. We've had the people to have some freedoms in education. I think we're starting to really get to a dangerous place when we say the government decides who the winners and losers are. I think, once again, the bigger a government gets, the more it limits our ability to determine ourselves. Self-determination in education, self-determination even in our media. You can see the more consolidation there is, the more unfair the media becomes. And the media is very divisive right now. It really can affect the outcome of democracy, because if you only have one media source or one slant, and you don't have the freedom of speech that sometimes is limited, then you no longer have the ability to make progress. And if you're not making progress towards new ideas and different ideas and accepting different ideas, can you imagine if we were all forced into one religion or one understanding of politics, and we no longer had open debate and open ideas? And when the media starts controlling that, then we control our ability to share ideas. And one thing I appreciate about His Highness Aga Khan is he's not one of those people that's exclusive, very open to discussion. That means that you have a good product. That means that somebody can defend what they believe and why they believe it, and that you can show the benefit for all people, rather than saying, I don't want to hear about your differences. I don't want people to be educated. And whenever you have a religion or a government that doesn't want to have a sharing of ideas, that means there's something wrong with your idea, and that's why you don't want to discuss it. I think we have to have open discussion. We have to have those freedoms and that understanding of our Constitution, which defines our freedoms and protects our freedoms. That's the biggest reason we have a government, is to allow us to share those ideas and to become more whole as a nation, rather than more separated or more controlled by a government that would have them tell us what we have to be. And that's why I say, once again, a freedom can guarantee a democracy, but democracy doesn't always protect freedom. We have to be very careful that the United States continues to be a republic, and a democratic republic, if you will, that protects our individual liberties, so we can be who we have always defined ourselves being, with your rights and my rights being even taken above the majority.
Thank you so much, Dr. McCormick. I think, it's amazing to be within a country that acknowledges and appreciates democracy. I understand the unforeseen times we're in today, but amazing framework that's been laid out by our forefathers to allow for the democracy that we practice today. I agree with you. There are communities, media that's out there that is challenging who we are and what we are today and the practices within the community. But at the same time, we must remember and appreciate the rights and the freedom of speech that we have comes from the laid out constitution that our forefathers have laid out. I appreciate that thought. And we do hope that as we go through this, there's more conversation around the globe for genuine hope for life and better quality of life, as the Aga Khan constantly promotes. Just moving on, within civil society, professions such as teachers, nurses, and journalists are critical to stable growth and democracy. These professions are under-resourced with respect to salary and professional development training. If the economic status of these professions is not corrected, how will this impact our future education, healthcare, and ensuring a pluralistic media?
Great question. I love this because this really gets to the heart of what we're fighting for right now in America. If you look at nurses and healthcare, education system, if you look at journalistic approaches to things, once again, the more we give power to the people to determine our own fate, the better off we are. If you look at our healthcare system, there's been many different things said about healthcare in the last several years, and what we have found is that the more the government takes over, the more expensive it's gotten. The government's always well-meaning, but it doesn't always result in good endpoints. As a physician, and I'm an ER physician that practices right now at nighttime, and I've been practicing during this whole campaign, but the one thing that I've seen is people keep on coming in and say they love their healthcare. We have great healthcare in America. I dare to stack our healthcare against anybody in the world. The problem is it's becoming more and more expensive. We come up with something that the government has controlled with, says the Affordable Care Act. And I'm not picking on any president. Matter of fact, the Republicans had a very similar response to Bill Clinton when he wanted to make a universal health care. And so the government, once again, saying that we want to get good health care for everybody, we want it to be affordable, but the government never makes things more efficient. The bigger something gets, the less competition there's involved, and the more we take it out of the hands of the people, the less accountability that has. Most people, since we came up with the Affordable Care Act, have found that their health care has become less affordable. Matter of fact, the average person has had over double their premiums. And that doesn't count the 1/5 of every dollar you spent on taxes going to the healthcare system already for Medicare and Medicaid. You've seen your deductibles go up, and you've also seen something called surprise billing, which is when you go for a healthcare services, and 50% of all Americans have gone through this, where you get a bill that's not covered by your insurance company. That's a problem that was created by the government. And isn't it a shame that we keep on turning to the government to solve the very problem that the government created? I think it's time to put power back in the people's hands. When it comes to healthcare, education, or even the media, the government shouldn't be controlling things. That's not the American way. That's never resulted in the best options. If you look at, I'll give you a perfect example of healthcare, where a LASIK eye surgery used to cost $4,000 per eye. This is over 20 years ago. Why is it cheap now? It's less than $1,000 per eye. The care is better and cheaper because it's not paid for by your insurance company, because it allowed the free market to settle it. And I'm not saying that healthcare insurance shouldn't be, that it doesn't serve a purpose. It should be there for catastrophic purposes. I understand some people with pre-existing conditions have to be helped out because there's no way that the system can be burdened that. But right now you have a healthcare system that's broken, and Medicare for all would not work because it's underfunded. Medicare payments right now underfund healthcare, and that's why your premiums are higher, because it has to pay for what those premiums don't pay for. In other words, the government will not fund. If we go to a healthcare system funded only by the government, it will be underfunded, it will be rationed, and just like Canada, which is one of the better healthcare for all systems paid for by the government, you will have up to a 21-week wait, and it's getting worse every single year just to see a specialist once you're diagnosed. That means that your heart catheterization, or to get rid of something wrong with your brain, or a GI specialist, you have to wait almost a half year to see those people because you have to ration it. 10 years from now, we would have $30 trillion more added to our healthcare costs in America if we go to socialized medicine, and it would be worse. And the VA is a great example of that. And that spills over to education too. Once again, the less options you have, less option you have with media. Anytime the government's involved and controls it, we have fewer options and it's more expensive.
And I think those are, there's a few different sides. Our frontliners, such as our teachers, our nurses, our journalists, need forward-thinking leaders, as you have mentioned. And at the same time, we as a community need that support on the other end as well, to be able to have services that are available with the right amount of choices, to have a better community, have our kids be provided with the education that is just. And we live in a country that speaks highly of education and the quality of education we provide compared to many other countries. So I think it becomes really important to have progressive thought, as you've mentioned, to be able to help us build into challenges that become strengths and don't remain weaknesses as we move forward. So we touched a little bit on the education as well as the healthcare. If we could shift just slightly to economy and focus on how we can rebuild small business. When I speak about small business, I'm looking at businesses that have 50 employees or less. They're continuing to struggle. And as a result of the pandemic, what role or responsibilities do the government have to support small businesses during these challenging times? And your thought on that?
So one of the problems we've had is we keep on thinking that the government's going to deal with us fairly when it comes to businesses. One thing that is a shortcoming of America, in my opinion, is we don't have a fair taxation system for small businesses. Most people don't realize that we have one of the highest corporate tax rates in the world. And this is very hard on small businesses, especially people who are startup businesses, people who immigrate here and are trying to do the right thing by establishing the American dream. And then they're taxed into oblivion, they're regulated into oblivion where they can't compete with the big boys who have already been around. That's why the NFIB has basically sponsored us and endorsed us, because they know that we understand more than anybody that if you want to look at this, the non-socialized models that work around the world, and you can even talk about countries that have socialized medicine, but they're able to afford it because they have such a low corporate income tax. And when you have a corporate tax that's very low, you're able to have maneuverability. And it shouldn't be even in these pandemic times. If the government's bailing you out, but runs out of money before your small business gets to the end of their paperwork, then that's not going to solve your problems. However, the government says, I'm not going to tax you until you get back on your feet. Now you can control your own destiny. If the government says, I'll take less of your money, now you can solve problems instead of the government taking away your money and then deciding how they want to help you out. That's backwards. You just added an extra layer of administration and burdensome regulation, and you just had to pay for an extra intermediary to get your money back that you already put into the system. That's not what government was ever intended for. The government was to protect your freedoms, to protect the environment, yes, to make it fair, yes, but not to take away your money and then determine how you are going to do your business later. And unfortunately, in many ways, that's what the American government has done recently. High tax rates on corporations, small businesses that limit your ability to improve and compete, instead of allowing you to have your money to begin with so that you can expand however you're going to do it. And it is good business to be safe. It is good business to be clean. It is good business to have diversity in your workplace. Those are things that your business can satisfy itself. You don't need a bunch of government people to tell you to do those things. That's natural. And there are already laws in place. We don't need extra people paid to limit your business and then decide if your business is going to live and survive during a pandemic when things are tough. We need less taxes. We need less regulation. We need to allow businesses to thrive so that they can supply our economy with the jobs so everybody can pay for their health care no matter where they go. So they have equal opportunities to move up and have that ability to continue to break through the ceilings of their past generations and be as successful as they want to be, depending on how hard they want to work.
Through the pandemic, it becomes so crucial to support those small businesses because they are who America is in essence. And, we all come here with those opportunities and see these unforeseen times, unfortunately, and rely on those supports, as you've mentioned, to be able to live fruitfully, live profitably, and then be able to be part of the community, as you've highlighted through your response. So if you don't mind, I'll switch now to social media so that we can talk about that a little bit as well. We've seen an increased role that social media plays in our lives, both positive as well as negative. Information can now be shared almost instantaneously around the globe. It also opens up a potential of bad actors to spread disinformation aimed at weakening societies. What role should governments play in ensuring that our democracies are not threatened by such acts while also being able to benefit from the positive side of what social media has to offer for us?
So these are very touchy subjects with a lot of people, because although I'm very much against misinformation, who decides what misinformation is? That's really a problem in American society. We have the First Amendment. It's one of our most cherished amendments in the Constitution. And the reason we have it is because the dissenting opinion is a lot of times where we've had progress in our nation. I can tell you as a physician, at one time, the dissenting opinion was that you wash your hands before surgery. Can you imagine if somebody said to you, you have bloody hands and you're going to your next surgery, you should probably wash your hands again. That was the dissenting opinion, because you wanted to look like you were that crusty guy who really knew what they were doing. They had tons of blood all over their uniform, but somebody said that's not clean and that's not safe. And they were the one that were censored. And that actually happened in the history of surgery. But if you don't allow that to happen, if you don't allow people to disagree, you'll never have any progress and we'll be stuck exactly where you are. And I think it's very important to allow people, even if they're wrong, to throw out their ideas. And we can talk about these things. We can prove things that are wrong. There's plenty of misinformation out there, but the problem is right now our media is very biased and only allowing certain things to be wrong, only correcting certain things that they think are wrong. I could be a doctor who has a different opinion, who went to 4 years of medical school, a residency, and has been practicing medicine for a decade, have a dissenting opinion that's supported by hundreds of other doctors, but because it's not in the majority, be censored because somebody in the media determined it didn't support their political view. That's very dangerous. That's very dangerous. You have somebody who's uneducated in a certain experience telling me that I can't be heard by the American public because they disagree with me, and saying that's misinformation. Whereas somebody else who I would say absolutely is wrong is not censored because it agrees with their political outlook. That's why I think it's important to allow dissenting opinions on both sides. And then you can determine what you tune into, what you believe. You can do your research. The American public can make a good decision if they're allowed to. If you look at these societies that don't allow a good dissenting opinion, I can tell you they are very much like China and other countries that control their media, control their outlets, control what the truth is based on their opinion. And that's a very dangerous way. That's not the American way. We need to have, yes, I agree, we should have filters. We should be able to get more truth out there. We should be able to take away things that are hateful and disturbing, but we have to be very careful about what those things are and how we define them. We need to be very careful that one person doesn't rule what the media is able to tell and how they tell it. And I think that's one of the problems we have with our current day media system. We've done research recently and we've shown that the media affects the outcome of elections by 4 points. That's way more than the Russians could. That's way more than any outsider could. But it's right here in the United States where you're seeing elections actually being disturbed by people who have real agendas because they want to control what the quote unquote truth is. And that's why it's important to protect the First Amendment, even when we disagree with others.
And it's a fine balance, and it always remains a fine balance, and it becomes that challenge to create that win-win for the social media to be able to present all its parts, as well as the public, the freedom of speech and the freedom of press to be able to voice and make opinions that can provide that balance that you mentioned. I mentioned earlier the speech His Highness gave at the Athens Democracy Forum in 2015. And in the same speech, he later said, one ultimate requirement for any effective democracy is the capacity to compromise. Social order rests in the end either on oppression or accommodation. But we can never find the balancing point where the interests of all parties are recognized. Unless competing leaders and their diverse followers alike are committed to finding a common ground. How would you implement that principle, and how would you influence your party to be able to do something similar?
Well, in this unbelievable time of dissent and where we really do spend a lot of time demonizing the other people in the political parties or religions or races, it's really unfortunate because America was never meant to be that way. And one of the things that's hurt my feelings, and I believe everybody has the right to their own opinion. whether you kneel in front of the flag or if you burn the flag. I have literally put my life on the line to defend people who would do those things, which I disagree with, but that's your right. As an American, you can do those things. But one of the things I find is most effective, and I think His Highness the Aga Khan has been very good at, and what I think other people in history have been very successful, is if you start that conversation with love, even if I disagree with you, if I have the same idea that I want to benefit you, I want to benefit our society, then it kind of disarms a lot of these people who would otherwise be name-calling and demonizing and dividing us. But I think we have to rearrange the way that we approach each conversation instead of starting with "you're wrong" when we have these conversions of faith and when we reach out to people and we talk about God's love. We don't start off the conversation by saying "you're wrong, you're evil." I start off the conversation with "God loves you and he wants what's best for you." And in the same way, if I love you and I want what's best for you, then you know that the thing that comes out of my mouth next is not going to be divisive, but hopefully something for the betterment of your children and my children together in this great nation. And so we can rearrange the way we approach each problem to understand that we want what's best, not just for me, not just for my state, not just for my district, but for this great nation, for all people as we move forward. I mean, the United States is one of the most generous countries in the entire world. Why are we so generous? Why are we so good at being magnanimous and spreading our wealth? It's because we have wealth, first of all. And if we get rid of everybody's wealth, then we won't be able to help anybody else at all. And what's made us wealthy and accomplished is we've allowed individuals to control their destiny. And most individuals are very good to the point where when they're successful, they willfully want to spread their wealth to other people who are in need. And they'll do it with great accountability and with great generosity. And when the government takes over and you no longer have that ability to share your wealth and no longer have accountability in those relationships that we built through our churches, through our temples, through our mosques, through our communities, now it's up to the government to figure out who the winners and losers are. And that may not be what we want representing us. And so that's why it's very important to maintain our own integrity, our own control of our finances, the ability to be as pluralistic as you want to be, as diversified as you want to be, but also have the ability to express yourself in your faith with your means and not to have a government tell you what those are. But that it all starts with that conversation of love, that we want the same thing, which is good things for all people.
Dr. McCormick, I have to say, through our conversation here, the little bit that we've had time to spend with you, the one thing that I've really, really appreciated, and I don't think we hear enough from many community leaders, is the concept of how many times you brought up the word love, compassion, humility. These are all things that we as the Ismaili community work and live by because of the guidance we get from His Highness the Aga Khan. But it's amazing to be able to speak with a leader from my community. I'm part of District 7, and to be able to hear you be able to talk about love, compassion, being able to change the way we communicate, and speaking with yes, but, or speaking with God loves you, speaking with words that are promising and positive, and then being able to put out the issues that may be. How wonderful it would be if all of us would be able to work that way. I appreciate the time that you've given, your thoughts that you've given to us. Before we conclude, I'd like to get some final closing thoughts from you.
Absolutely. So first of all, I really appreciate the community really reaching out towards me, knowing that we don't all agree on everything, but that you do have a very diverse community. I loved visiting the Ismaili community recently. They're very generous with their time, and we're just taking time to explain the belief system and really reading a bunch of articles about His Highness Aga Khan and just what he's doing in community outreach throughout the entire world, and understand that conversation is what's most important, that we don't have the prideful arrogance that we have a total monopoly on the truth, that we can have conversations and affect each other in very positive ways. And sometimes we can have differences, and that even makes us stronger. And that's why I really appreciate having you in our community, having you in our district. I appreciate this time that we have to share ideas. And I appreciate the outlook, really, the generosity and the community that your community represents, reaching out to other people, despite their beliefs, just really looking for the betterment of all people. And I think that's what our government should be doing too, but not in an intrusive way, but to facilitate groups that want to do those things, because we know it's good for our community and we know it's going to have better accountability than our government could ever have. And if you want to know anything about what my policy is going to be moving up, it's going to be limit the interference of government to determine your outlook and your community from being successful. Because I think that's always what's made America great, is believing in the people, believing in the human soul, believing that love will change people's hearts, not government. And love is the answer to what ails us. And governments have never been able to heal over nations. Governments don't get in the way. You cannot make a law that gets rid of prejudice. You cannot make a law. All you can do is focus on somebody's heart. The only thing that gets rid of prejudice in my life has always been love. It's what gets rid of hate, prejudice, division. And you mentioned those things. I'm very appreciative. That's why I think our communities get along, even if we have different religious backgrounds. If we start out that conversation with that word that you just said, and I'm glad you're affirming that, because I think that's why we all get along so well, is because we both have the idea that we can grow together in this community as Americans, no matter where we're from. That's what made this American spirit so great, and immigrants from all over the world, where we can still get along, move forward, and be the most prosperous nation the world's ever seen in the history of mankind. So thank you for this opportunity to come out here together. And I'm looking forward to moving forward and to really working with you in the future. Thank you so much.
Best wishes to you for November as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McCormick, for sharing your time and perspectives today. In 2004, His Highness the Aga Khan addressed attendees at the Leadership and Diversity Conference in Canada. He said, and I quote, "The Ismaili Imamate strives to ensure that people live in countries where threat to democracy is minimal and seeks to draw on the experience of established democracies, which have a vibrant civil society, are sensitive to cultural difference, and are effective in improving the quality of life of their citizenry," unquote. It is my hope that we will continue to be in constant dialogue with the political class to continue strengthening our democracy. On behalf of the Ismaili Jamatkhana and Center, thank you for joining.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.